What's up, Emmanuel Youth? My name is Pastor Allie, and this is our sermon recap for week 4 of Fresh. And this is the main idea. One moment can kickstart a movement. So let's dive into this. We're going to be reading Mark chapter 5. Verse 1, it says this. They went across the lake to the region of Gerasenes. And when Jesus got out of the boat, a man with an impure spirit came from the tombs to meet him. And the man lived in the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain. For he had often been chained hand and foot, but he tore the chains apart and broke the irons on his feet. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Night and day, among the tombs and in the hills, he would cry out and cut himself with stones. And when he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and fell on his knees in front of him. And what we see in a couple of verses later, Jesus, he heals this man and completely, he comes back to his right mind. Jesus sends out the demons from this man. And we're going to pick up in verse 15. It says this. And when they came to Jesus, they saw the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons. So the townspeople, they came to come see what had happened to this man. And they saw him sitting there, dressed and in his right mind. And they were afraid. And those who had seen it told the people that what had happened to the demon-possessed man, and told them about the pigs as well. Then the people began to plead with Jesus to leave their region. And as Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him. Jesus did not let him, but said, "Go home to your own people and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you." And so the man went away and began to tell in the Decapolis, which is just 10 cities in that region, how much Jesus had done for him. And all the people were amazed. This man, he had a crazy story. He was bound up, living in tombs, full of chains, and Jesus totally turned his life around. He had a crazy testimony. And there's something so powerful about our stories, about our testimonies. And testimonies are just a collection of moments that have marked us. And we see from this story that there's 2 key components of a testimony. And the first one is an encounter with Jesus. Verse 2 talks about how Jesus, he stepped out of the boat and the man came up and ran and met him there. He encountered Jesus, because an encounter with Jesus can change everything. And the second part of a testimony is an experience. And so this man, he experienced Jesus by Jesus healing him and restoring him and casting these demons out that were inside of him. And see, a testimony is born out of an experience with Jesus and an encounter with Jesus. So we all have a story. We all have a testimony. But I think a lot of us, we face this tension. So where do we begin in recognizing and sharing our stories? What is my story? And how can God use my story? And it's so important we answer these questions, because your story, your moment with Jesus can kickstart a movement. And so our first key is this: know your story. See, this man, he understood where and who he was before his encounter with Jesus. And there was a moment when the man knew that he was in his right mind and that Jesus had restored him. See, one moment he was chained and broken, and the next moment he was fully restored. That was his story. That was his testimony. And in the same way, the first step in knowing our own stories is to understand where and who we were before our encounter with Jesus. And for me, before I met Jesus, what marked my life was I felt like I was forgotten, and I never felt like I was seen or heard, or that anyone truly cared about me. I felt alone. I felt forgotten. But after I encountered Jesus, and I remember the day it happened, after I encountered with him, there was a new story, a new moment that I had with Jesus, and that I was dearly loved, I was seen, and I was heard, and he was the God who sees me and knows me. And it was a moment with Jesus, and that's my testimony, that's my story. And so for you, you can know your story by first recognizing where you were and where you've been before Jesus. And second, recognizing who you are now that you have Jesus and you encountered him. So that's my story. What's your story? And the second key is this: share your story. It says in verse 20, the man visited 10 different cities. That's crazy. And not only that, he proclaimed the great things that Jesus had done for him. See, he didn't just keep his experience and his moment with Jesus for himself, but he shared it with everyone. And that's the same heart God wants for us, that the moments we have with him, they don't stay with us, but we use it and we share it with everybody. See, and what we see is that in Mark 7, Jesus, he returns to that city. And no longer were the people casting him out and telling him to leave, but they actually brought out all their sick, and they're like, "Jesus, please stay with us." And it's because one man had a moment with Jesus and shared his story that the whole region was impacted and a movement was started by someone's one moment with Jesus. And in the same way, your moments with Jesus can kickstart movements in your schools and in your families and in the cities around you. And the third key is this: Invest into someone's story. And I love in Mark chapter 7 when Jesus returns to the same town that was trying to cast him out, they began bringing people to him, people that were lame and sick and that needed him. And those people that were carrying these people to Jesus, they were investing into their friend's story. They were investing into their family's story by doing something about it. And in the same way, you can invest into the stories of the people around you that don't know Jesus yet by bringing them. Maybe it's simply inviting them to church, but it's an action step. It's sharing an encouraging word with them, sharing a verse with them. It's doing anything you can to help them get to Jesus. Invest in someone's story with action, doing something. And so my encouragement for you this week is this. Number 1, write down your testimony. You have to know your story. Take 5-10 minutes, write it down. Where were you before God? And where are you now after you encountered him? Number 2, share your testimony with a friend. Maybe you haven't done it before. Maybe you practice sharing your testimony with someone you know and someone you trust. But maybe you have a friend that just needs hope, that needs an encouraging word. And maybe just bring it up in conversation like, hey, I see you're going through that. I went through that before too. And here's what God taught me. Here's what he's done in my life. Here's how he's changed me. There's so much power in your testimony. You just have to share it for that power to be unleashed. And the third thing is this. Invest into someone else's story. What part are you playing in someone else's testimony? Invite someone to church this week. Invite someone to a Zoom call we have at church. Someone that needs prayer. Ask if you can pray for them, what they need prayer for. Invest into someone else's testimony this week, because here's what I know. One moment can kickstart a movement. And if we want to see movement in our cities, in our schools, and in our families, it starts with us encountering Jesus, having a moment, sharing our moment, not only that, but investing into someone else's story. Thanks, guys.